Administration. Priorities. The record. Briefing room. Espanol. Menu. National Climate Task Force. This is a case where conscience and convenience cross paths. We're dealing with this existential threat to the planet, and increasing our economic growth and prosperity are one and the same. When I think of climate change, I think of jobs. President Joe Biden, before signing executive actions on tackling climate change, creating jobs, and restoring scientific integrity, January 27, 2021. Take climate action in your community. Find out how the Inflation Reduction Act can help you or your family save on energy bills, purchase electric vehicles and energy-saving appliances, and access the economic opportunities of the clean energy future. Find out how the bipartisan infrastructure law can help your community supercharge the transition to clean energy, clean up pollution, and more. Encourage your community to join the President's Building Performance Standards Coalition to reduce emissions while lowering energy bills. Explore the new Solar Power in Your Community guidebook to accelerate solar projects and jobs in your city, county, or town. Follow President Biden's lead on sustainability. Help your company, organization, or local government reduce emissions across operations through the Better Climate Challenge. Apply to join the Department of Energy's Clean Energy Corps, a group of current agency staff and new hires who will advance the clean energy revolution. President Biden's actions to tackle the climate crisis. President Biden campaigned on a bold vision of tackling the climate crisis with the urgency that science demands, by building a clean energy economy that benefits all Americans with lower costs for families, good-paying jobs for workers, and healthier air and cleaner water for communities. Since day one, President Biden has delivered. After rejoining the Paris Agreement and restoring U.S. leadership on the world stage, President Biden created the first-ever National Climate Task Force, with more than 25 cabinet-level leaders from across agencies working together on groundbreaking goals. Reducing U.S. greenhouse gas emissions 50 to 52% below 2005 levels in 2030. Reaching 100% carbon pollution-free electricity by 2035. Achieving a net-zero emissions economy by 2050. Delivering 40% of the benefits from federal investments in climate and clean energy to disadvantaged communities. The Biden-Harris administration is taking decisive steps to reduce emissions, increase resilience, advance environmental justice, and achieve true energy security. This federal mobilization, building on the leadership of states, tribal nations, and local governments, has already spurred historic progress. The United States set records for clean energy deployment in 2021, bringing enough new solar and wind projects online to power 10 million homes and tripling utility-scale battery storage capacity. The 3 millionth electric vehicle hit the road, 135,000 chargers were installed, and companies invested over $110 billion in EV and battery manufacturing, helping create battery manufacturing capacity to supply 13 million EVs each year. Major climate firsts included the administration's approval of the first commercial-scale offshore wind project in federal waters, the first commercial flight powered by 100% sustainable aviation fuel flying from Chicago to D.C., and U.S. steel and cement companies committing for the first time to reach net zero emissions no later than 2050. Clean energy is by far the biggest job creator in America's energy sector, with over 3 million Americans employed in clean energy jobs during 2021, earning wages 25% over the national median. On the international stage, President Biden worked with EU counterparts to rally more than 100 countries to join the Global Methane Pledge, a new partnership to reduce superpolluting methane emissions 30% from 2020 levels by 2030. President Biden and Vice President Harris also made tackling climate change, advancing environmental justice, and creating jobs centerpieces of the Inflation Reduction Act and bipartisan infrastructure law. Passed in August 2022, the Inflation Reduction Act is the most significant legislation in U.S. history to tackle the climate crisis and strengthen American energy security. It will lower energy costs for households, saving families hundreds of dollars per year on energy bills, create millions of good-paying jobs for American workers through manufacturing of solar panels, wind turbines, and electric vehicles, and deliver a healthy future for our children and grandchildren by cutting pollution and advancing environmental justice. The savings, jobs, and other benefits provided by this legislation will reach communities across the country. Additionally, the bipartisan infrastructure law provides historic resources for upgrading the power grid, improving public transit and investing in zero-emission transit and school buses, installing a nationwide EV charging network, cleaning up legacy pollution, replacing lead pipes and delivering clean water. President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure law will also strengthen the nation's resilience and save taxpayer money, helping communities safeguard against extreme weather events, catastrophic wildfires, and other climate-related disasters which last year caused more than $165 billion in from the biggest 18 weather and climate disasters alone. President Biden and Vice President Harris also made climate action and environmental justice a centerpiece of the bipartisan infrastructure law. This legislation provides the largest federal investments ever in upgrading the power grid, improving public transit and investing in zero-emission transit and school buses, installing a nationwide EV charging network, cleaning up legacy pollution, replacing lead pipes and delivering clean water. President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure law will also strengthen the nation's resilience and save taxpayer money, helping communities safeguard against extreme weather events, catastrophic wildfires, and other climate-related disasters which last year caused more than $145 billion in damages from the biggest 20 disasters alone. This is the decisive decade for the world to confront climate change and avoid the worst, irreversible impacts of this crisis. That's why the President has called on Congress to act on climate by providing clean energy investments and tax credits that will bring down the sticker prices of EVs, weatherize homes, and businesses to cut energy costs, and save American families an average of $500 a year. President Biden will continue leading to meet this moment and deliver economic opportunities, health benefits, and household savings here at home by accelerating our transition to clean energy, and protecting Americans from fossil fuel price spikes. President Biden's leadership in action. Through executive and regulatory actions, public-private partnerships, international diplomacy, and more, President Biden is working towards achieving his bold goals while taking steps to grow the economy, create jobs, and build a clean energy future, all while rallying the world to step up to reducing emissions and accelerating clean energy. President Biden and Vice President Harris have mobilized a whole-of-government effort in every sector of the economy, taking executive actions that will reduce greenhouse gas emissions, accelerate clean energy production and deployment, and create good-paying jobs that strengthen the economy. In addition to the actions below, the administration is leading by example across federal operations and procurement through the President's Federal Sustainability Plan. Power sector. Transportation sector. Buildings sector. Industry sector. Lands and agriculture sector. Advancing environmental justice and empowering workers. President Biden and Vice President Harris have worked since day one to confront environmental injustices, toxic pollution, underinvestment in infrastructure and critical services, and disproportionate impacts from climate change on communities across the nation. The administration has activated the entire federal government to advance environmental justice and for the first time in our nation's history, elevate the voices, perspectives, and lived experiences of environmental justice communities to guide White House and federal government priorities, policies, investments, and decision-making. The Biden-Harris administration is committed to continually fighting for environmental justice through early, meaningful, and sustained partnership with communities and dedicated leadership in federal agencies. More on environmental justice and workers. Strengthening climate resilience. As climate-related extreme weather events increase in frequency and ferocity, the Biden-Harris administration is taking bold steps to strengthen the nation's resilience to severe impacts climate change has on our communities, infrastructure, economies, and more. More on climate resilience. Leveraging domestic ambition to rally global peers. While the U.S. has committed itself to addressing the climate crisis, Countries across the globe must also step up, given that more than 85% of global climate pollution comes from beyond our borders. President Biden and his team are rallying the world to take the decisive action needed in this decade to tackle the climate crisis. More on international efforts. Building the National Climate Resilience Framework. President Biden is building toward a vision for a climate-resilient nation designed to guide and align climate resilience investments and activities by the federal government and its partners. This framework was released at the first-ever White House Summit on Building Climate-Resilient Communities, which brought together 70-plus representatives from more than 25 states, territories, and tribal nations to identify and accelerate progress on locally tailored, community-driven solutions that will both dramatically reduce greenhouse gas emissions and better manage climate threats. Read the summit proceedings. National Climate Task Force membership. Senior Advisor for Clean Energy Innovation and Implementation John Podesta, Chair. National Climate Advisor Ali Zaidi, Vice Chair. Secretary of the Treasury Janet Yellen. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. Attorney General Merrick Garland. Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland. Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack. Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo. Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona. Acting Secretary of Labor Julie Suh. Secretary of Health and Human Services Xavier Becerra. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development Marcia Fudge. Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg. Secretary of Energy Jennifer M. Granholm. Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas. Administrator of General Services Robin Carnahan. Chair of the Council on Environmental Quality Brenda Mallory. Administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency Michael Reagan. Administrator of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration Bill Nelson. Administrator of the Small Business Administration Isabella Casillas Guzman. Chief Executive Officer of AmeriCorps Michael D. Smith. Director of the Office of Management and Budget Shalonda Young. Director of the Office of Science and Technology Policy Arti Prabhakar. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate John Kerry. Domestic Policy Advisor Susan Rice. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. Homeland Security Advisor Liz Sherwood Randall. National Economic Council Director Lael Brainerd. White House Infrastructure Coordinator Mitch Landrieu. Read more about how the White House Office of Domestic Climate Policy coordinates an all-of-government approach to tackling the climate crisis. Stay connected. Sign up. Email address. Zip code. Share. Home. The Administration. Executive Offices. Priorities. The Record. Briefing Room. The White House. Disclosures. Get involved. Espanol. Contact us. Privacy Policy. Copyright Policy. Accessibility Statement. The White House 1600, Pennsylvania Avenue NW Washington, D.C. 20500. Scroll to top. Top.